Boy Meets World Season 1 Episode 2 On the Fence originally aired October 1st, 1993. It was written by Jeff Sherman and was directed by David Traynor, who would continue to direct the other episodes in Season 1 and most of Season 2. Here we get into the traditional plot structure of the season, incorporating domestic, school, and extracurricular environments in order to better explore the characters and Cory's relation to them. For whatever reason, characters Bornahay and Kincaid were dropped. Bornahay fulfilled two roles. One role is as Cory's friend, subordinate to Cory himself and at the same level as Sean. The other role is as an active agent in the classroom, to play off of other students, namely Kincaid. And On the Fence, Bornahay is replaced with a black kid in his role as Cory's friend. I'm not sure if this character gets a name. He was also replaced with Stuart Minkus, played by Lee Norris, in his role as active agent in the classroom. When Topanga is introduced in Season 1, Episode 4, Cory's Alternative Friends, he'll relate to her as Bornahay related to Kincaid. As discussed on the DVD commentary, the character Stuart Minkus was originally named Stuart Lemke, but it turned out that there was exactly one Stuart Lemke living in Philadelphia, so they had to change it for legal reasons. Otherwise it would be considered about him. Minkus is a perfectionistic nerd who always tries to get Feeney's approval, and later, romance with Topanga. In contrast to Bornahay, Minkus does not occupy the same hierarchical position as Cory and his friends. He is considered lesser because he is a nerd, and fair game for the average kids to pick on. Sadly, this includes Cory. I really don't like this move. Even if Cory is sometimes a bit obnoxious, he's a likable protagonist who challenges the 90s status quo as a main part of his character. He should be a better person. Basically, the show endorses bullying. As for the black kid, he's a bit more flamboyant than Bornahay and Sean, and closer to Cory in that regard. On the one hand, it makes him more interesting, but it also competes with Cory as the outrageous element, which might be why they dropped that character too. Sean doesn't compliment Cory at this point, but he's too docile to compete with him either. Again, I have to wonder what things could have been like with this kid as the best friend instead of Sean. The plot of the episode involves Cory trying to get a powerful water gun for a water shootout event that the kids have planned, the Water War, and learning to appreciate his father at the same time. The episode starts with him and his friends talking in the cafeteria about what superhero they'd like to have as a father, with Cory wanting Superman because he's the most powerful. I don't know, if my father were going to be a superhero, I'd base my criteria on who's nicer, not who's stronger. Personally, I'd pick the Thing from the Fantastic Four. He's only tough on the outside. The conversation turns to the Water War, and they decide to warm up by harassing Minkus, because the show thinks bullying is fine if the victim is a nerd. Minkus retaliates by getting his huge water gun from Dracula's coffin, and holding the black kid in a standoff.
Go ahead. Make me wet.
Wow. Add that to the list of unintentionally sexual-sounding lines.
I slept with him for 11 years!
Cory launches himself on a quest to buy a $50 water gun. He begs his parents for it, but they don't think it's reasonable to pay $50 for a toy. Eric shares that he bought a wacky computer watch with his own money. Cory first begs him for a water gun, and Eric ignores him. And Cory decides to come up with the money himself. One might think this is a reasonable, responsible decision. Not in the eyes of Boy Meets World. He asks his father for a job, which is when we learn that Alan is the manager of a grocery store. But Alan says he's too young. Okay, reasonable. Cory complains and presses him to give him a job, and Alan keeps asserting that Cory needs to not work because he is a kid and should enjoy the lack of responsibility. Cory storms off. Alan's statement is the moral of the story. Cory needs to not work and be a kid, because being a kid is a blessed time free of responsibility. I find that really condescending. Cory is willing to take responsibility and work for what he wants, and that's good character, not growing up too fast. All he wants is a toy for a game, not to get married or anything like that. And throughout this, Alan is seen working on the pipes because the parents can't afford a plumber, indicating that work is a necessity of adults that adults themselves hate. But maybe they should have made better financial decisions. You think? There's a joke where Alan sarcastically complains about their decision to have an expensive house or 3 kids, and it's presented as totally sarcastic because that was the only decision they could have reasonably made. But that's just not true. Plenty of people only have 1 kid, or no kid at all, and they don't opt to live in expensive neighborhoods. It's the same kind of condescending attitude of, this is the only way to do things and it is fundamentally good, so just accept it, you brats. Later on, the show uses the Matthews' relative affluence to contrast with Sean's impoverished family. Technically, that element doesn't exist in the first season, where everybody is upper middle class and lives in the suburbs, but it still is ironic when Amy is later noted for giving an expensive gift to the mailman.
He's my biological father, but he doesn't know that I know.
Cory goes to Feeney for work. Cory makes him 2 different offers, but Feeney rejects them both. He instead offers Cory a job painting window shutters for the sum of 5 times 2 times 8, because everything has to be a teaching moment with teachers. Cory is terrible at math, and Feeney decides to be a cheapskate and only pay him what Cory thinks that comes out to, $58.
Because Feeney's a butt.
I actually like that Feeney isn't just a noble teacher, and that he can have human flaws too, like wanting to cheat a kid out of money. And the show makes it clear that Feeney is being a little greedy here. It actually accomplishes the noble goal of encouraging kids to study without being condescending, just by making it clear that someone could cheat them out of a profit if they don't know how to multiply. That practical lesson is far more effective than most of their attempts to honor the academic system, including later in the episode. Cory does a good job, and Feeney pays him $58. Unfortunately, he forgets that shutters have holes in them, and ends up painting stripes on the family's fence. His parents make him repaint before he can go play. When his classmates show up to collect him, he tries the Tom Sawyer routine to trick them into helping, but Minkus catches it because he's read the book. This attempt to promote studying falls flat on its face because 1. Cory doesn't do the routine as effectively as Tom Sawyer.
You say paint a fence, I say party.
And it's hard to believe that his friends would actually fall for it. And 2, everyone knows the whitewashing the fence trick. It's one of the most reproduced scenes in American media. It's like knowing the twist in Psycho. It's just ingrained in American pop culture. There is no way these kids aren't familiar with it. So it's really just a cheap knockoff of Tom Sawyer, hijacked for a condescending message to promote studying. Cory offers them $7 to help him repaint, and they accept that even though that only leaves each of them with $2.33. Even with inflation, that's still less than $4 in today's money. They also ask for sandwiches, which Cory provides from his refrigerator, and they ask for ice cream, and Cory goes to get ice cream bars from the fridge. He and Eric complain about ignoring things they have to put up with when they work, which is supposed to emphasize the idea that it's valuable to just be a dependent kid, but it doesn't really work when they're voluntarily doing it. It's fine to complain about annoying things, but it's not like there's a big argument against the exchange of labor for currency. And it's not like just going to the fridge to get ice cream that his mom bought is very tasking on his part. When he brings out the ice cream, they complain about the flavor. It isn't very nice when they're offered free food, but Cory reacts in the worst way possible. He bullies Minkus. I mean, they all complain, but Cory regularly antagonizes Minkus, so he picks on him. He covers Minkus's ice cream in dirt and suggests that he eat it. That's right, kids. Bullying is fine as long as the kid you're picking on is a total dweeb. The kids abandon him to go play in their water war. As Sean promised to help for payment, and Cory already gave them lunch, sort of in the case of Minkus, Cory sarcastically threatens to sue him. Sean shoots back that Cory's lawyer should call Sean's mom. It's kind of cute, but it's clearly put in there as an emphasis on how absurd it is that Cory thinks he can do grown-up things like have a job, and pay people to do things that they should follow up on. Feeney comes out to tell Cory to remove an offending dribble of paint on his side of the fence, when Feeney could clearly do it himself. What a jerk!
Feeney's a butt.
Cory falls down with exhaustion, and Alan shows up to defend him. Feeney now kind of stands for a mean, authoritarian, conservative elder, and he espouses his views about how kids should be forced to work hard for discipline, as Feeney's father worked him. Alan takes this in, decides Feeney is not a good role model at this point, and tells Cory to stop working, because it's Cory's job to just be a kid and play. Alan then takes over the work of painting the fence, so that Cory can run to the water war. While it's great that Alan wants to help his kid have fun, and has the time and ability to help Cory clean up his mess, I really hate this message that kids shouldn't work. It really is a very modern idea and very restricted to the upper class. Cory should have the ability to choose to earn money through work. Maybe he would choose against it, but he should have the opportunity to grow, like one of Mr. Feeney's flowers, instead of being stuck in some sort of schedule where it's not his time to grow yet, and he should just appreciate his scheduled innocence. It's really the whole problem of public schools' system of grades and lesson plans applied to the extracurricular world. There is a schedule in place, and the message is about how Cory should appreciate the schedule instead of making things work for him to center his own education and growth. Mr. Feeney is presented as a grumpy old teacher to represent an extreme conservative side of the argument, where he wants Cory to work to suffer for the sake of discipline. That is fairly depicted as wrong, which is a lesson that Boy Meets World itself could stand to learn in Season 7, with its The Honeymoon is Over plot arc. But there's more to the argument for working than just mean old guys wanting to punish kids. Cory's right to choose to work for a fair exchange is denied. And Alan himself is pushed into working for Cory's sake because that is supposed to be a parent's duty. It's about asserting a model for how families have to work that denies personal agency and is depicted as wholly good. This is the kind of preachiness that Boy Meets World sometimes suffers from that just pisses me the hell off. And why did Cory have to paint the fence that day anyway? Couldn't he just be allowed to play in the water war and then work on it later? Except for the parents' desire to punish the kid, I don't see any real need for him to work on a fence right then. The whole premise is entirely too rigid. Cory observes Alan working hard for his benefit and learns to appreciate his dad's actions, comparing him to Superman. Does Superman really work that much? Isn't his thing that he doesn't have to work? I guess he loses his powers sometimes, but that's not really what the character is known for. And then there's the flaw of him honoring Alan specifically, and not both his parents. Season 1, Episode 6, Boys to Mensa, has Alan praise Amy for working a full professional career, in addition to working as a homemaker. You'd think that Cory would have some appreciation for her too. The show clearly sets this up with the superhero discussion, but I don't see why it couldn't be about superhero parents and not dads. They could have had the black kid wish for his mother to be Wonder Woman and take him riding on the invisible plane. Maybe he was raised by a single mother. Just one line like that could flesh out that character. But no, he talks about wanting his dad to be Batman, taking him riding in the Batmobile. And Cory ends up honoring Alan, but not Amy. After the water war, Cory trades his water gun for 2 smaller ones, and invites Alan to play with him and be a kid again for a while. He sort of invites Amy, but turns it into a joke, which again kind of disrespects that character. But Amy finds her own way to join in. The family ends up having a blast with their own mini water war in the yard. Mr. Feeney complains as a grouchy neighbor, but they ignore him. It's a bit of a mixed message here, where it's okay and healthy for the parents to act like kids sometimes, but not for Cory to act like an adult or even his big brother for less than a day. I'd attribute that to the message just not being well thought out. The episode ends on a joke where Morgan mistakenly calls 911 for help and says some ambiguous things that makes it sound like there's some kind of domestic abuse-fueled murder in action. This would be funny if the line was delivered by a competent actor, but this is Lily Nixay we're talking about. Lily Nixay as directed by David Traynor and not John Tracy, and her dialogue comes out extremely stilted.
They just shot the neighbor!
I really don't want to pick on Lily Nixay too much, but she was not right for this part. And so concludes On the Fence, the first real episode of Boy Meets World after the pilot. It's a bit of a mess. The show still has to find its groove. This is the kind of thing I didn't like as a kid, but didn't have the ability to quite put my finger on why. Now that I'm older, I can understand it better. It's an attempt to preach a wholesome family message, but I have some serious issues with that message. I think its portrayal of how things ought to be is really off base, and is disrespectful to the characters through denying them agency. I think Amy isn't respected as much as she should be, and that the episode makes it very arbitrarily about Cory and Alan. I really don't like Cory acting as a bully towards Minkus, which of course he does throughout the season, and everyone knows the whitewashing the fence trick. I mean, come on. Even for Season 1, this episode is a stinker.
Stinks!
Stinks!